With her last $2,500 and an eviction notice burning in her hand, Sarah Mitchell bet everything on a crumbling farmhouse no one else dared touch, a decision that would unearth a secret hidden for decades. Sarah Mitchell, 34, stared at the eviction notice, its red letters screaming, 14 days to vacate. Her trembling hands placed it beside unpaid bills and a photo of her 8-year-old daughter, Emma, kicking a soccer ball. Morning light filtered through threadbare curtains in their cramped apartment. Their home since Derek, her husband, vanished 3 years ago, claiming he needed to find himself. His child support stopped 6 months back, leaving Sarah with $2,500, her last offense against homelessness. Once an environmental engineer with a promising career, Sarah had scaled back to part-time consulting to manage Emma's severe asthma, diagnosed at age 4. Now, debts piled high, and options dwindled. "Mommy, are you sad again?" Emma's voice came from the hallway, her stuffed rabbit clutched against purple pajamas. Sarah wiped her eyes, forcing a smile. "No, sweetie, just thinking. Breakfast before school." As she poured cereal, her mind raced. Her parents were gone, her sister overseas, and struggling, credit cards maxed. The day before, Emma's principal had called. Emma fell asleep in class again, the 3rd time this week. "Is everything okay?" Sarah had mumbled excuses, not mentioning the neighbor's noise or cigarette smoke triggering Emma's asthma through thin walls. After dropping Emma at school, Sarah scrolled rental listings in her decade-old Honda. Nothing affordable near Emma's school or her clients. Just as she closed her phone, an ad caught her eye. County tax auction, 15-acre farmstead, Pine Creek, Miller County. Starting bid, $2,000. Sold as is. Photos showed a dilapidated farmhouse, a sagging red barn, and overgrown fields. Vacant for a decade, seized for unpaid taxes, it was 40 minutes from the city, commutable. No mortgage, just taxes she could cover with consulting income. The catch? It needed major repairs. Sarah researched the property. The 1,800 square foot farmhouse, built in 1910, renovated in the 1970s, had 3 bedrooms, a well, and septic system. Owned by Robert Anderson until his 2013 death, it passed to an heir who never lived there. All day, Sarah obsessed over the idea. That night, after tucking Emma in, she studied rural living, repair costs, and Pine Creek, a quiet, agricultural area with clean air for Emma's asthma. The local school had good reviews. Buying a fixer-upper with her last funds, with no farming experience, was madness. But homelessness or a dangerous neighborhood seemed worse. By morning, she decided a roof over their heads, maybe land to sell later. "We're going on an adventure," she told Emma, who bounced excitedly as they drove to the courthouse. The auction room was packed, but most bidders eyed commercial lots. When the Pine Creek farmstead came up, Sarah's heart pounded as she raised her paddle. $2,000 from bidder 0001, the auctioneer called. "Do I hear $2,100? No one bid. Sold for $2,000. Sarah transferred her funds, her stomach churning. The clerk, Mrs. Grayson, gave her a strange look. "The Anderson place. You know why no one else bid?" Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" Grayson whispered. "Robert Anderson, military man, kept to himself. Strange vehicles at night, odd equipment. Some say he built a doomsday bunker." Sarah shivered but brushed it off. "Probably gossip," she said, taking the deed. Emma's excitement buzzed like a live wire as the old pickup rattled down the gravel driveway, kicking up dust that swirled in the late afternoon sun. "Can we have a pony? Chickens? Oh, maybe goats," she asked, her nose pressed against the window, eyes wide at the sight of their new home. Sarah gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles whitening. "Maybe someday, Em," she said, forcing a smile. "First, we make the house livable." The driveway, marked by a faded wooden sign reading Anderson in chipped white paint, stretched toward a weathered farmhouse. Its gray siding peeled like old skin. The sagging porch looked one storm away from collapse, and the windows were either boarded up or shattered, their jagged edges glinting. Beyond the house, 100 yards off, stood a barn, faded crimson, its roof patchy with missing shingles. Overgrown fields sprawled across 15 acres, dotted with wildflowers and tangled weeds, bordered by dense woods that seemed to whisper secrets. "It looks haunted," Emma said, her voice gleeful, as if she'd stepped into one of her adventure books. "It needs love," Sarah replied, her stomach sinking as she took in the decay. "And it's ours." The setting was peaceful, almost too quiet. No hum of traffic, no neighbors' voices, just the gentle roll of hills and the faint gurgle of a stream cutting through the property. Sarah parked near the porch, the truck's engine coughing to a stop. She grabbed the keys from her pocket, their weight unfamiliar, and glanced at Emma. "Ready to see inside?" Emma nodded, practically bouncing out of the truck. Sarah unlocked the front door, its hinges groaning in protest. "Emma, stay close. We need to check the floors, don't want you falling through." Inside, the air was thick and musty, like a forgotten attic. Cobwebs hung like tattered curtains, swaying in the draft from broken windows. The previous owners had left remnants of a life. A tattered sofa sagging in the living room, a dining table with mismatched chairs, their wood scarred and dusty. The first floor unfolded into a living room with a stone fireplace, its hearth cold and streaked with soot. A dining room with warped floorboards. A kitchen with rusted appliances that looked older than Sarah, and a study with empty bookshelves, their varnish cracked but intact. Upstairs, a narrow staircase led to 3 bedrooms with peeling wallpaper and a bathroom where the sink was stained rust red. The study felt the most solid, its floorboards firm underfoot. Sarah decided it would be their base for the first night. She hauled in their sleeping bags, a cooler of food, and a box of supplies, then set to work hanging old sheets over the broken windows to keep out the chill. Emma, undaunted by the house's state, explored every corner of the study, running her fingers along the bookshelves. "It's like indoor camping," she declared, grinning as she flopped onto her sleeping bag. As night fell, the house came alive with sounds, creaks from settling wood, the distant hoot of owls, the wind whistling through gaps in the walls. Emma fell asleep quickly, her soft snores blending with the night's chorus, but Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Grayson's word from the realtor's office echoed her mind. The Andersons built a bunker down there, you know. Cold War paranoia. Nobody's been inside in years. She dismissed it as small-town gossip, but now, in the dark, it felt heavier, like a stone lodged in her chest. By morning, sunlight filtered through the sheets, casting a soft glow over the study. Sarah sat up, stiff on the hard floor, and resolved to explore. After a breakfast of granola bars and bottled water, she set Emma up with a stack of books in the living room. "Stay here, okay? I'm checking the cellar. Yell if you need me." Emma nodded, already engrossed in a dog-eared copy of The Secret Garden. Sarah grabbed her flashlight and headed to the kitchen. The day before, Emma had pointed out a heavy wooden door tucked behind a pantry shelf, half hidden by a sagging curtain. Sarah pulled it open, revealing stone steps that descended into darkness. The air grew cooler as she stepped into the root cellar, her flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The dirt floor crunched under her boots, and dusty canning jars lined crude shelves, their contents long spoiled or evaporated. Her beam swept the walls, landing on a section of stone that looked off. The stones were too uniform, their edges too precise, with faint seams forming a rectangular outline. A disguised door. Sarah's pulse quickened as she ran her fingers along the seams, feeling for a latch. One stone shifted under her touch, grinding against its neighbors. With a low rumble, a panel slid open, revealing a concrete tunnel beyond. Cinder block walls stretched into the dark, lined with rusted conduits and wires. A structure too deliberate, too professional for a simple root cellar. It sloped downward, the air growing colder, damper. "Mom, you okay?" Emma's voice echoed from the kitchen, sharp with concern. "Fine, sweetie," Sarah called back, her voice steadier than she felt. "Explore the living room, okay? Stay there." She took a deep breath, steadying her nerves, and stepped into the tunnel. The flashlight beam trembled slightly in her hand, illuminating the smooth, gray walls. The conduits suggested electricity, maybe lighting or ventilation, military grade, just as Grayson had hinted. The tunnel curved slightly, descending deeper, and Sarah's boots echoed in the confined space. After a dozen steps, the tunnel widened into a small chamber. Her flashlight caught the glint of metal. A heavy steel door, its surface pitted with rust but solid, with a wheel-like handle like something from a submarine. A faded stencil on the door read, "Restricted access." Sarah's breath caught. This wasn't just a bunker, it was built to keep something in or out. She reached for the handle, her fingers hesitating. The air felt heavier here, charged with a silence that pressed against her eardrums. Whatever lay beyond, it was part of the Anderson legacy, part of the house she'd bought sight unseen to escape her past. She glanced back toward the tunnel's entrance, where faint light from the cellar spilled in. Emma's humming drifted down, a reminder of why she was here. A fresh start, a home for her daughter. Sarah gripped the wheel, her resolve hardening. She'd face whatever this place held, one step at a time. Sarah's boots echoed faintly as she descended the narrow concrete steps into the tunnel, leaving Emma upstairs with a coloring book and a promise to be quick. The air grew cooler, carrying a stale, metallic tang. The tunnel stretched 30 feet, its rough-hewn walls dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. It turned sharply right, opening into a 40-foot square room that stopped Sarah in her tracks. Smooth, green-painted walls gleamed under dark fluorescent fixtures that buzzed faintly when she flicked a switch. This wasn't some forgotten storage space. It was something else entirely. Metal shelves lined one wall, cluttered with outdated computers, their monitors yellowed and dusty, alongside stacks of reel-to-reel tapes and radio equipment with dials and antennae. A row of desks stood in the center, one bearing a faded nameplate. R. Anderson, USAF. Sarah's fingers brushed the engraved letters, her mind racing. This wasn't a bunker. It was a military installation, hidden beneath the unassuming farmhouse she'd just bought. She moved to a rusted filing cabinet in the corner, its drawers screeching as she tugged them open. Inside were folders labeled Blue Forest Monitoring Station, each stuffed with yellow documents. Skimming one, she caught phrases like aerial anomaly detection and unidentified signatures. Her pulse quickened. What had she stumbled into? A heavy steel door on the far wall caught her eye. It opened with a groan, revealing a narrow hallway leading to a Spartan setup. For bunks with thin mattresses, a kitchenette with canned goods long past expiration, and a small bathroom with a rusted sink. This place was built for long stays, for people who needed to disappear underground. As Sarah turned back, her foot nudged something metallic, a keyring half buried in dust, holding a few keys and a small black fob with a single red button. She crouched to pick it up, but the distant roar of car engines froze her. The sound was too loud, too close. Heart pounding, she shoved the keyring in her pocket, slammed the heavy door shut, and bolted back through the tunnel. She emerged in the pantry, closing the hidden panel behind her with a soft click, and raced upstairs. "Emma, someone's here," Sarah called, trying to keep her voice steady. Emma looked up from her crayons, her small face creasing with worry. "Mommy, why are soldiers here?" she asked, peering through the kitchen window. Outside, 3 black SUVs had pulled into the gravel driveway, their tires crunching ominously. Men in military fatigues spilled out, moving with purpose, while 2 others in plain clothes lingered near the vehicles, scanning the property. "Stay in the kitchen, sweetie," Sarah said, brushing a hand over Emma's hair before heading to the front door. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and opened it to face a tall man in his 40s. His fatigues bore no insignia, but his posture screamed authority. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, his voice clipped. "Major Paul Carter, Air Force Special Investigations. We need to discuss this property." Sarah's stomach twisted. "How do you know my name?" she asked, stalling for time. Carter produced an ID, its seal glinting in the morning light. "It's a matter of national security. May we come in?" Her eyes flicked to Emma, now peeking from the kitchen doorway. "My daughter's inside. Can we talk privately?" Carter nodded, gesturing to a colleague, a younger man in similar unmarked fatigues, who stepped back toward the SUVs. "You bought this property yesterday, correct?" Carter asked, his gaze steady. "Yes," Sarah said, keeping her tone neutral. Were you aware of its history? The clerk mentioned the previous owner was military, reclusive. That's all I know. Carter studied her, his expression unreadable. Captain Robert Anderson ran a decommissioned monitoring program here. You accessed it this morning, triggering sensors. Sarah's breath caught, but she kept her face blank. I was exploring my new home. Found a basement. That's all. Carter's eyes narrowed slightly. That basement is a restricted site. Anderson's program was shut down in 1998, but the equipment is still sensitive. We need to ensure nothing was disturbed. Nothing was, Sarah lied. The weight of the keyring burning in her pocket. Just old junk down there. He tilted his head, as if weighing her words. We'll need to inspect it. Standard procedure. Sarah hesitated, her mind racing. Letting them inside meant they'd see the tunnel, the room, the files, everything. But refusing could raise more suspicion. Can I see your ID again? She asked, buying time. Carter handed it over without breaking eye contact. The badge looked real, but something about his calm intensity set her nerves on edge. Mommy. Emma's voice came from behind, small and scared. Sarah turned, forcing a smile. It's okay, sweetie. Go back to your coloring. Carter softened slightly. We're not here to cause trouble, Ms. Mitchell. But this property has a history you weren't told about. Anderson's work involved tracking unusual activity. The kind that doesn't show up in real estate records. Unusual activity? Sarah echoed. Her curiosity piqued despite her fear. Classified, Carter said, shutting down the topic. We'll need access to the lower level. Now, Sarah's hand tightened on the doorframe. She could feel the situation slipping out of her control. The fob at her pocket seemed to pulse, its purpose unknown but heavy with possibility. Give me a moment to get my daughter settled, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Carter nodded, but his eyes followed her as she closed the door partway and turned back toward Emma. She had minutes, maybe less, to decide what to do. Let them in or find out what that keyring unlocked before they did. Sarah stood in the dim light of her farmhouse kitchen, the weight of the hidden keys in her pocket pressing against her conscience. She admitted to exploring the cellar door, her voice steady but her eyes darting to the side. Did you remove anything? Carter asked, his tone calm but probing, his DOD badge glinting under the flickering bulb. She shook her head, denying it, the keys a silent secret. Just looked around. Dr. Helen Price, a Department of Defense scientist with sharp features and a no-nonsense air, stepped forward, her clipboard clutched like a shield. What exactly did you see down there? She asked, her voice clipped professional. An office, old equipment, some bunks. Nothing active, Sarah replied, keeping her description vague but truthful enough to avoid suspicion. She glanced at the window, where dusk settled over the rolling fields of her inherited property. Price nodded, her expression unreadable. Blue Forest was a monitoring station in the 1980s, tracking aerial phenomena. It's decommissioned, but the site remains sensitive. We need to know everything you've touched or seen. Before Sarah could respond, a small figure appeared in the doorway. Mom, I'm hungry. Emma's voice cut through the tension, her wide eyes scanning the strangers in her home. Carter's stern demeanor softened slightly as he knelt to her level. You must be Emma. Sarah's spine stiffened. How do you know her name? She demanded, stepping protectively toward her daughter. Standard background checks, Carter said, standing, his hands raised in a placating gesture. We're thorough. It's protocol for a site like this. Emma, oblivious to the undercurrent, tugged at Sarah's sleeve. Mom, I saw you open that secret door. It was so cool. Her innocent enthusiasm landed like a grenade. Price's eyebrow arched, her gaze sharpening. A secret door? She turned to Sarah. We need to secure any materials down there. Your cooperation is appreciated, but it's not optional. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Fine, but I want answers. What's happening on my land? Outside, the air was crisp, the fields stretching into the darkening horizon. Price walked Sarah to the edge of the porch, away from Emma's curious ears. Carter and his team, clad in nondescript tactical gear, moved with quiet efficiency toward the cellar entrance behind the house. This area, Price began, was a hotspot for unexplained aerial events decades ago. Anderson, the previous owner, wasn't just a farmer. He was a covert operative monitoring those events for the Air Force. The data and technology in that facility are still classified. Sarah crossed her arms, her breath visible in the cool evening air. Is it dangerous? For me? For Emma? Carter, overhearing as he directed his team, chimed in. It's just a monitoring station, Sarah. No active operations. But it's classified, and we can't have civilians poking around. Sarah's eyes narrowed. How'd you even know I opened it? The house has no power, no security system. Price's lips pressed into a thin line. An autonomous system with satellite uplinks. It's low power, self-contained, and still active enough to alert us when the door was breached. Sarah's stomach churned. The idea of an invisible eye watching her property unnerved her. So you've been spying on me? Not you, Price clarified. The facility. It's protocol. She produced a non-disclosure agreement. The paper crisp and official. Sign this. It covers what you've seen and Anderson's role. Refusal complicates things. You could lose the farm. Sarah hesitated, glancing at Emma, who was now playing with a stick in the yard, oblivious to the stakes. The weight of the keys in her pocket felt heavier. She signed, her signature shaky but resolute. Carter's team worked swiftly, emerging from the cellar with crates of outdated equipment, metal boxes with faded labels, spools of magnetic tape, and cryptic logbooks. One soldier, a young man with a buzz cut, winked at Emma as he passed. No aliens, Keith. Just Air Force stuff. Emma giggled, but Sarah caught the soldier's glance at Price, as if seeking approval. By mid-afternoon, the team had cleared the cellar. Carter approached, wiping sweat from his brow. The facility's cleared. The entrance stays, but the locks are disabled. Limit time down there for safety. Price lingered to explain the NDA in detail. No discussing the facility, Anderson's role, or anything found below. Sarah, still processing, asked Grayson, the realtor, said Anderson built a doomsday shelter. Is that true? Price's expression softened slightly. The site served dual purposes, monitoring and, yes, a fallback shelter. Anderson was paranoid, and the Cold War didn't help. Locals spun it into something more colorful. Sarah pressed further, her curiosity outweighing her caution. UFOs? Is that what you're hiding? Price sighed, choosing her words carefully. Unexplained aerial observations. Not little green men, but data valuable to certain parties, military, scientific, even private sectors. The tech down there, though outdated, could still fetch a price on the wrong market. Sarah's mind raced. So Anderson was a spy, not a farmer? Both, Price said. He blended in. The farm was his cover, and he was good at it. But his real work was logging anomalies, lights, objects, patterns in the sky. Most were atmospheric or experimental aircraft, but some we still don't have answers for. Emma ran up, interrupting. Mom, can we go down there now? I want to see the secret room. Sarah crouched to her level, forcing a smile. Not today, sweetheart. It's just boring old stuff. But her eyes flicked to Price, searching for any hint of a lie. Price met her gaze. Keep her out of there, Sarah. Not because it's dangerous, but because it's a liability. You're a civilian now, not part of this. Let's stay that way. As Price and Carter's team loaded the last crates into unmarked vans, Sarah watched them drive off, dust trailing in their wake. The cellar door, now propped open, seemed less like a mystery and more like a wound, something her family had stumbled into, something that could still bleed. She clutched the keys in her pocket, wondering if she'd made the right choice by staying silent. That night, as Emma slept, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, staring at the NDA. The house was quiet, but the weight of the cellar below pressed on her. She'd signed away her right to ask too many questions, but the questions hadn't gone away. What else had Anderson hidden? And who exactly was still watching? As they left, Sarah fingered the keys. Emma asked, Can we see the secret rooms? Not now, sweetie. We focus on the house. That night, Sarah examined the keys. 3 metal ones and a fob. Were they a trap? Exhausted, she slept uneasily, dreaming of tunnels and lights. Morning brought focus, make the house livable. Sarah listed repairs, utilities, roof, windows, plumbing. She and Emma cleared debris, finding the well worked. A metal detector in a shed thrilled Emma. Treasure hunt. The electrician, unfazed, said Anderson had a generator, always ready for outages. Power returned by sunset. Less spooky now, Emma said over sandwiches. After bedtime, Sarah's curiosity won. She reopened the hidden door with a better flashlight. The tunnel's lights flickered dimly, tied to the house's power. The room was stripped, but Anderson's desk drawers were locked. The third key opened one, revealing a notebook, maps, and a logo-less device. The notebook, Anderson's journal from 1989 to 2013, detailed sightings. They're not random, responding to this region. The final entry, days before his death, read, "They're shutting us down. I've hidden the truth where they won't look. The land protects it." As Sarah and Emma stepped out of the old Anderson house, Sarah's fingers brushed against the keys in her pocket, their weight a quiet reminder of the secrets they might unlock. Emma, skipping beside her, tugged at her sleeve. "Can we see the secret rooms, Mom? Please." Her eyes sparkled with the thrill of adventure. "Not now, sweetie," Sarah said, her voice gentle but firm. "We need to focus on making the house our home first." Emma pouted but nodded, distracted by a butterfly darting across the overgrown lawn. That night, after Emma was tucked into bed, Sarah sat at the creaky kitchen table, the keys spread before her under the glow of a single bulb. 3 were metal, their edges worn but sturdy. 1 ornate, 1 plain, and 1 with a jagged cut. The 4th was a fob, sleek and modern, its button unresponsive when pressed. She turned them over, her mind racing. Were they a gift from Anderson's estate, as the lawyer claimed? Or a trap, bait for something darker? Exhaustion crept in, and she rubbed her temples, the day's labor settling into her bones. Sleep came uneasily, her dreams a tangle of winding tunnels and pulsing lights that flickered just out of reach. Morning brought clarity and a renewed sense of purpose. Sarah woke to Emma's chatter and the smell of instant coffee brewing on the camping stove. Over breakfast, she jotted down a list of repairs: utilities, roof, windows, plumbing. The house was a fixer-upper, but it was theirs now, a fresh start after years of scraping by. "Let's make it livable," she told Emma, who grinned, eager to help. They spent the day clearing debris from the main rooms, sweeping dust, and hauling broken furniture to the curb. In the backyard, they discovered the well still worked, its water cold and clear. Emma squealed with delight when they found a rusty metal detector leaning against a wall in the shed. "Treasure hunt," she declared, waving it like a sword. Sarah laughed, the sound easing the knot in her chest. The electrician arrived at noon, a grizzled man named Hank who seemed unfazed by the house's eerie reputation. "Old Man Anderson had a generator," he said, wiping sweat from his brow as he worked on the fuse box. "Always ready for outages, that one." Kept to himself, but he was prepared. By sunset, power hummed through the house, the lights steady and warm. Emma, munching on a peanut butter sandwich in the kitchen, looked around. "It's less spooky now," she said, her mouth full. Sarah smiled, but her thoughts drifted to the keys. After Emma was asleep, Sarah's curiosity tugged her back to the hidden door in the basement, its outline barely visible behind a sagging shelf. Armed with a better flashlight, she eased it open, the hinges groaning. The tunnel beyond was narrow, its walls rough-hewn stone. The dim lights along the ceiling flickered to life, tied to the house's newly restored power, though their glow was weak, casting long shadows. She followed the passage to the room she'd glimpsed before, a small, concrete chamber, stripped bare except for Anderson's heavy oak desk. The desk's drawers were locked, their handles cold under her fingers. She tried the keys one by one. The ornate key and the plain one didn't fit, but the jagged third key slid into the lock of the top drawer with a satisfying click. Inside, she found a worn notebook, a bundle of maps, and a small device with no logo or markings, a matte black rectangle with a single red button. Her pulse quickened as she opened the notebook, its pages filled with Anderson's tight, slanting handwriting. The entry spanned 1989 to 2013, a chronicle of strange sightings in the region. Lights in the sky, unexplained sounds and patterns in the fields. They're not random, Anderson wrote in one entry. They're responding to this region, to something here. The maps, yellowed and brittle, were marked with coordinates, circles, and cryptic notes. Signal strongest at ridge. Avoid the eastern hollow. Sarah's eyes lingered on the final entry, dated just days before Anderson's death. They're shutting us down. I've hidden the truth where they won't look. The land protects it. Her breath caught. Who were they? And what truth had Anderson hidden? She examined the device, its surface cool and unyielding. Pressing the red button did nothing. No sound, no light. Frustration gnawed at her, but so did a spark of determination. Whatever Anderson had uncovered, it was tied to this house, this land. She tucked the notebook, maps, and device into her bag, locking the drawer behind her. Back upstairs, she sat on the couch, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. The fob key still puzzled her. Its modern design clashed with the others. She pressed its button again, half expecting nothing, but this time a faint beep sounded from the garage. Heart pounding, she grabbed her flashlight and headed outside. The garage, a sagging structure separate from the house, was padlocked. None of the metal keys fit, but the fob's button triggered another beep and the lock clicked open. Inside, under a tarp, was a vehicle. Not a car, but something bulkier, its shape unfamiliar. She pulled the tarp away, revealing a rugged, armored ATV, its frame reinforced and fitted with strange equipment. A dish-like antenna, a panel of blinking lights, and a compartment labeled Geological Survey. A note taped to the handlebars read, in Anderson's handwriting, "Trust the land. Follow the ridge." Sarah stepped back, her mind reeling. Anderson hadn't just been a recluse. He'd been chasing something big enough to hide, to protect. The keys weren't just for doors. They were for answers. But answers to what? And was she ready to follow where they led? She locked the garage and returned to the house, the weight of the keys heavier now. Tomorrow, she'd focus on the repairs, on Emma, on building their life. But the notebook's words echoed in her mind. The land protects it. Whatever Anderson had found, it was still out there, waiting. Sarah stared at the map, its edges worn and creased, a red circle marking a wooded spot deep in the farm's sprawling acres. The device, activated weeks ago by Anderson's fob, had flickered to life on the desk, displaying a cascade of files, grainy videos of unexplained lights, dense data logs, and fragmented communication attempts with something beyond comprehension. Overwhelmed, Sarah had locked it all away in the study's safe, her mind reeling. Was Anderson delusional, chasing shadows in his final years? Or was this real, evidence of something extraordinary? She pushed the questions aside. Emma and the house came first. Weeks bled into one another as Sarah threw herself into rebuilding their new life. The farmhouse, weathered but sturdy, demanded constant attention. She patched the sagging roof, wrestling with shingles in the crisp autumn air, and replaced cracked windows to keep out the chill. For the bigger jobs, rewiring the flickering lights and reinforcing the porch, she hired Grayson's cousin, a quiet man named Eli, who worked with steady hands and asked no questions. Emma, meanwhile, thrived. The clean air of the farm worked miracles. Her asthma, a constant shadow in the city, vanished. Her wheezing nights were replaced by deep, peaceful sleep. The local school, a small brick building with a playground overlooking rolling hills, welcomed her warmly. Emma came home with stories of new friends and a teacher who let them draw during science class. For the first time in years, Sarah felt the knot in her chest loosen. By day, Sarah resumed her consulting work, transforming Anderson's cluttered study into a makeshift office. The room, with its heavy oak desk and shelves of dusty books, became her sanctuary. She logged into video calls with clients, her laptop balanced on a stack of old almanacs, while the world outside hummed with bird song and the distant bleat of goats. At night, when Emma was asleep, Sarah's thoughts drifted back to Anderson. Under a loose floorboard in the study, she'd found his journal, a leather-bound book filled with meticulous handwriting. She read it in stolen moments, the pages revealing a man consumed by the farm's secrets. Anderson believed the land was special, a nexus of sorts. He documented extraordinary events, inexplicable lights hovering over the fields, soil samples with impossible mineral compositions, and brief, disorienting moments where time seemed to slip. "The farm is a doorway," he wrote in one entry. The ink smudged as if his hand had trembled. To what? I'm not yet sure. A month after settling in, curiosity got the better of Sarah. On a crisp Saturday morning, she followed Anderson's map into the woods, Emma trailing behind with a metal detector slung over her shoulder. The girl's enthusiasm was infectious. She swung the device in wide arcs, chattering about buried treasure. The map led them to a clearing where a turtle-shaped rock jutted from the earth, its mossy surface glinting in the sunlight. Emma's detector erupted in frantic beeps. "Mom, it's here!" she squealed, dropping to her knees. Sarah grabbed the shovel and dug, her heart pounding as the blade struck something solid. Scraping away the dirt, she uncovered a metal plate embedded in the ground, a keyhole at its center. Her fingers fumbled with Anderson's keyring, and the smallest key, a delicate silver thing, clicked into place. The plate swung open, revealing a waterproof box nestled in a concrete hollow. Inside, Sarah found 3 items: a thick portfolio, a metallic cylinder no larger than a flashlight, and a data drive sealed in a plastic case. Back at the house, she spread the contents across the desk. The portfolio was a treasure trove of Anderson's unofficial research, decades of work he'd kept hidden. There were Polaroids of strange, angular crafts hovering above the tree line, their edges blurred as if defying focus. Pages of spectral analyses charted unknown energy signatures, and handwritten notes speculated on non-human technology, with phrases like adaptive metallurgy and temporal distortion underlined in red. The cylinder, when activated with a faint hum, projected a 3D star map into the air, a constellation of glowing points connected by faint lines, none resembling any sky Sarah knew. She turned to the data drive, slotting it into the desk device. The screen lit up, revealing 25 years of research, video logs of Anderson in the woods, audio files of low-frequency hums, and a database of encrypted communications he'd labeled attempts to respond. Sarah leaned back, her mind racing. Anderson hadn't been mad. He'd been methodical, obsessive, and perhaps closer to a truth than anyone should be alone. The farm wasn't just a refuge. It was a puzzle one Anderson had entrusted to her. But why? She glanced at Emma, now curled up on the couch with a book, oblivious to the weight of their discovery. Sarah's instinct was to protect her daughter, to keep this buried. Yet the journal's final entry haunted her. The doorway will open, ready or not. Someone must be there to meet it. The next morning, Sarah began cataloging the portfolio's contents, cross-referencing them with the data drive. She noticed patterns, dates of sightings aligned with lunar cycles, energy spikes tied to specific coordinates in the woods. The star map, when overlaid with Anderson's maps, pointed to a second location on the farm, a hilltop half a mile away. She hesitated, torn between fear and a growing need to understand. Emma's voice broke her reverie. "Mom, can we go treasure hunting again tomorrow?" Sarah smiled, masking her unease. "Maybe, sweetheart. Let's see what this place has in store." As night fell, Sarah sat at the desk, the cylinder's star map casting faint light across the room. She opened Anderson's journal to a dog-eared page, where a single sentence was circled: "The farm chooses its keepers." Outside, the wind stirred the trees, and for a moment, Sarah thought she heard a low hum, faint but unmistakable, rising from the woods. That night, Sarah stood on the porch of her family's farmhouse, the cool air heavy with the scent of earth and blooming jasmine. She'd heard Anderson's stories, wild tales of lights in the sky, orbs that danced above his fields, leaving behind crops that grew at unnatural speeds. She dismissed them as the ramblings of an eccentric old farmer, but now, as she gazed upward, her breath caught. Above the garden, Pulsating orbs of light hovered, their movements defying physics, darting, pausing, then gliding in patterns no aircraft could mimic. One orb, glowing a soft amber, descended low over the garden, casting a beam of light that bathed the plants in an eerie, golden glow for exactly 30 seconds before vanishing into the starry night. By morning, the garden was unrecognizable. Tomato vines sagged under the weight of ripe, crimson fruit. Squash swelled to the size of pumpkins, their skins taut and gleaming. Beans, barely budding the day before, hung heavy and mature. Sarah's daughter, Emma, ran out, her eyes wide. Aliens visited, she declared, clutching her favorite stone, a smooth river rock etched with the Fibonacci spiral she'd found by the creek. Sarah, still reeling, couldn't argue. She called Dr. David Lee, a local soil scientist and friend of Anderson's, to see the phenomenon for himself. Lee arrived by noon, his weathered face skeptical but curious. He'd known Anderson well, sharing his fascination with the farm's inexplicable fertility. Kneeling in the dirt, Lee collected soil samples, his fingers brushing against roots that seemed to pulse with life. "This isn't normal," he muttered, filling vials with earth and plant clippings. Back at his greenhouse, Lee's test revealed something extraordinary. The soil contained trace minerals and microbes unknown to terrestrial science, and Anderson's archive plants, stored from years of similar events, showed DNA sequences with no earthly match. "This farm," Lee said, meeting Sarah's gaze, "it's an intersection point. A place where something not from here touches down." Sarah showed him her footage, captured on her phone, the orb's hypnotic dance, the beam illuminating the garden. Lee's eyes lit up. "This is it," he said. "Proof of non-human intelligence enhancing agriculture." Anderson had suspected as much, Lee explained, but his death, a supposed accident in his barn, felt suspicious. Before he died, Anderson had scattered his research among trusted allies, fearing it would be suppressed. Lee had inherited some of those notes, cryptic but detailed, hinting at a pattern of visitations tied to celestial alignments. Determined to understand, Sarah and Lee formed an uneasy partnership. She became the observer, documenting each event with cameras and notebooks, while Lee analyzed the physical evidence. The visitations came like clockwork, twice a month, always under a clear sky. The orbs seemed to interact with the garden, their lights pulsing in sequences that felt deliberate. Emma, now a fixture in their late-night vigils, called the farm a lighthouse for spaceships, her imagination weaving stories of cosmic gardeners tending their earthly experiments. Sarah indulged her, but the girl's keen I noticed details even the adults missed, like how the orb's pulses sometimes mirrored the Fibonacci spiral on her stone. One moonless night, as the three sat in the garden, an orb descended closer than ever. Its light flickered in a rhythmic pattern, and Emma gasped, holding up her stone. The pulses matched its spiral, a perfect sequence of short and long bursts. "It's talking to us," she whispered. Sarah's camera caught every second, the footage crisp and undeniable. Lee, scribbling furiously, noted the timing. The pulses aligned with mathematical constants, a language woven into the fabric of the universe. "This isn't just agriculture," he said, his voice trembling. "It's communication." The next morning, the garden had changed again. New plants, unfamiliar hybrids with shimmering leaves, sprouted among the tomatoes and beans. Lee's tests confirmed their DNA was alien, not just altered but engineered. Sarah uploaded her footage to a secure server Lee recommended, knowing Anderson's fate might await them if they weren't careful. Emma, undeterred, sketched the orb's patterns, convinced they were messages of goodwill. As the trio prepared for the next visitation, Sarah felt the weight of their discovery. The farm wasn't just a point of contact, it was a bridge to something vast, and they were only beginning to cross it. Bennett Farm, as Sarah had renamed it in honor of Captain Anderson's legacy, blossomed into a vibrant hub of life. The once neglected property now thrived under her care, its fields bursting with crops that defied the seasons. Sarah's days were a whirlwind of activity. She oversaw renovations to the farmhouse, managed her consulting work remotely, and tended to Emma, whose laughter now echoed through the fields. The surplus produce, kale, tomatoes, and carrots that grew with unnatural speed and abundance, was quietly donated to local shelters. Sarah took care to conceal the farm's identity, wary of drawing attention to its extraordinary yields. The secret of the soil, enriched by forces she was only beginning to understand, remained hers to protect. Emma, now 8, had transformed as much as the land. Her asthma, once a constant worry, had vanished entirely since they'd moved to the farm. She ran through the fields without a wheeze, her cheeks flushed with health. Sarah watched her daughter with a mix of relief and wonder, suspecting the farm's strange vitality had something to do with it. The underground facility, hidden beneath the barn, had become a sanctuary for their work. By day, it served as a lab where Sarah analyzed Anderson's archive, decades of meticulous notes, star charts, and cryptic signals. By night, it was where she cross-referenced her own data, mapping the farm's anomalies against Anderson's records of unexplained phenomena. The soil samples, analyzed by Lee, a trusted agronomist friend, confirmed what Sarah had suspected. The land contained trace elements and isotopic signatures unknown to conventional science. These findings explain the garden's impossible growth. Carrots sprouting in days, tomatoes fruiting in weeks, their flavors richer than anything Sarah had tasted. "Our plants are magic," Emma declared one morning, cradling a carrot she'd pulled from the earth, its orange hue almost luminous. Sarah knelt beside her, brushing dirt from her hands. "This farm has special soil," she said, choosing her words carefully. Emma's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Because of aliens?" she asked, her voice a mix of excitement and innocence. Sarah hesitated, glancing at the horizon where the sky seemed to hum with unseen energy. "Captain Anderson studied unusual things in the sky," she said. "We're not sure what they were, but they might have left something special here." Emma nodded, accepting the answer as only a child could, and ran off to plant another row of seeds. The farm's transformation extended beyond its crops. Sarah had begun submitting proposals for sustainable farming initiatives, carefully framing them to attract grants without revealing the true source of the farm's success. Each proposal was a delicate balance, blending conventional agricultural science with just enough innovation to seem plausible. The grants funded upgrades, a solar-powered irrigation system, a greenhouse for year-round growth. But Sarah's real work happened in the underground lab. There, she pored over Anderson's journals, deciphering his obsession with the Fibonacci sequence and its appearance in both nature and the signals he tracked. She began to see patterns, the way the crops grew in spirals, the way the fireflies pulsed in rhythmic codes at dusk. The land itself felt alive, as if it had chosen her to carry forward Anderson's mission. As autumn settled over the farm, the air grew crisp, and the fields glowed golden under the setting sun. One evening, Emma tugged Sarah's sleeve, pointing to a swarm of fireflies flickering in the twilight. Their lights danced in patterns, mimicking the strange signals Sarah had seen in Anderson's records. "They're talking like the aliens," Emma said, her voice hushed with awe. Sarah watched, her heart quickening. She no longer felt fear at the thought of the unknown. Instead, a quiet certainty settled within her. A single firefly broke from the group, its light pulsing in a deliberate sequence, short, long, short, long, short, a perfect Fibonacci rhythm. Then it vanished into the night. "Message received," Sarah whispered, her breath visible in the cool air. "We're listening." The rhythm of their days grew steadier. Sarah balanced her roles with a grace she hadn't known she possessed. Mornings were for physical labor, tending crops, repairing fences, and teaching Emma the basics of planting. Afternoons were for her consulting work, fielding calls from clients who had no idea she was working from a farm that defied explanation. Evenings belonged to the lab, where Sarah pieced together Anderson's fragmented notes. His journal spoke of visitors who communicated through light and number, leaving traces in the earth. The soil analysis from Lee had confirmed the presence of rare isotopes, possibly extraterrestrial in origin, but Sarah kept those findings locked away. She wasn't ready to share them. Not yet. Emma, meanwhile, thrived in her new world. She named each row of crops. Carrots were Captain Crunchers, tomatoes Red Moons, and insisted on helping with every task. Her questions about the farm's mysteries were endless, but Sarah answered them with care, fostering her curiosity without overwhelming her. One night, as they sat on the porch, Emma pointed to the stars. "Do you think Captain Anderson's aliens are watching us?" she asked. Sarah followed her gaze, the sky a tapestry of light. "Maybe," she said, "but if they are, I think they're happy we're taking care of this place." Emma grinned, satisfied, and leaned against her mother. The farm had become more than a home. It was a purpose. Sarah felt Anderson's presence in every furrow, every glowing firefly. The land had chosen her, and she had chosen it back. As winter loomed, she began planning for the next season, sketching designs for a community garden to share the farm's bounty, carefully, anonymously. The world wasn't ready for the truth, but Sarah was. She and Emma would keep listening, tending the land, and waiting for the next message in the lights. Sarah's heart raced as she dialed Lee's number, the memory of the Fibonacci event still vivid. The garden had erupted in a cascade of growth, vines and blooms spiraling in patterns that mirrored the golden ratio, as if guided by an unseen hand. When Lee arrived, he stood at the edge of the field, his jaw slack. "Anderson documented this," he said, his voice tinged with awe. "But your footage is clearer, sharper. It's like they wanted you to see it." They sat in Sarah's kitchen, the table cluttered with notebooks and Anderson's old journals. Lee's eyes scanned the pages, lingering on sketches of light patterns and plant growth. "We need a plan," he said. "This is bigger than us." Sarah agreed. She would observe and document every detail, using her cameras and newly installed automated sensors to capture what Anderson's outdated equipment had missed. Lee would take samples of soil, plant tissue, even air particles, and connect with a small, trusted network of scientists. The underground facility beneath the barn, once Anderson's secretive hideout, would become their lab. It already housed his archive, boxes of journals, grainy Polaroids, and cryptic notes scribbled in the margins. Sarah's high-definition recordings now joined them, a modern counterpart to Anderson's obsessive work. Emma, Sarah's teenage daughter, had taken to the project with a zeal that surprised her mother. "It's like a secret science mission," Emma said, her eyes bright as she helped calibrate the sensors. Sarah smiled, but the weight of their task pressed on her. The visitation events were escalating. Each night, beams of light, pale gold, pulsing in rhythmic sequences, bathed the garden, coaxing plants to grow at impossible rates. One tomato vine had climbed 6 feet in a single night, its fruit heavy and improbably perfect. The sensors captured it all: light wavelengths, electromagnetic fluctuations, even faint acoustic hums that Sarah hadn't noticed until the data appeared. One crisp September night, as the autumn equinox approached, a light hovered over the barn. It wasn't the usual diffuse glow, but a focused orb, pulsing in a pattern that matched the spiral of river stones Emma had arranged in the garden weeks earlier. Emma gasped, pointing. "They're talking to us, Mom." Sarah nodded, her camera already rolling. The light's pulses weren't random. They traced the Fibonacci sequence, each burst corresponding to the next number in the series. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. Sarah's pulse quickened. This wasn't just a phenomenon. It was a message. Lee arrived the next morning with 2 colleagues, Dr. Eliza Wong, a physicist with a knack for decoding complex signals, and Dr. Marcus Rivera, an anthropologist who specialized in symbolic communication. They gathered in the underground lab, its concrete walls now lined with monitors displaying Sarah's footage. Wong leaned close to a screen, her brow furrowed as she studied the light pulses. "It's deliberate communication," she said. "The Fibonacci pattern isn't just aesthetic, it shows intent. It's a universal constant, something an intelligence might use to signal awareness." Rivera, flipping through Anderson's journals, nodded. He saw more activity during equinoxes. This event aligns with the autumn equinox, September 22nd. It's like they're timing it to Earth's cycles. Sarah showed them the sensor data, spikes in ultraviolet light, magnetic anomalies, and a low-frequency hum that seemed to resonate with the Riverstone spiral. Wang's eyes lit up. This hum is not just sound. It's structured, like a language encoded in vibrations. She pulled up a spectrogram, pointing to repeating patterns. We need to cross-reference this with global data sets, other sites, other anomalies. Rivera added. Anderson mentioned similar events in his notes, but he never had this level of data. He thought it was spiritual. I think it's cultural, a dialogue across species, maybe across dimensions. Emma, perched on a stool, chimed in. What if the spiral is their alphabet? Like, each loop is a letter? Wang smiled, impressed. That's not a bad hypothesis. We'll test it. Sarah felt a swell of pride, but also unease. Emma was getting too involved, too invested. What if this was dangerous? The lights hadn't shown hostility, but their power was undeniable. One sensor had shorted out during the last event, its circuits fried by an energy surge. Over the next week, the team worked tirelessly. Lee analyzed soil samples, finding traces of unknown compounds, complex carbon chains that didn't match any known terrestrial molecules. Wang built a model to decode the light pulses, using the Fibonacci sequence as a key. Rivera cataloged Anderson's archive, uncovering references to ancient cultures that revered spirals as cosmic symbols. The Sumerians, the Celts, even the Hopi, he said. They all saw spirals as connections to something greater. Maybe they were seeing this too. One night, as Sarah reviewed footage, the lights returned. This time, they formed a double helix, twisting above the garden like a DNA strand. The sensors went wild, recording a surge in gamma radiation, brief but intense. Sarah called Lee immediately. It's escalating, she said. We need to figure out what they want before this gets out of control. Lee agreed, but his voice carried a hint of excitement. Sarah, we're on the verge of something historic. This could redefine everything. Science, anthropology, maybe even humanity's place in the universe. Emma, overhearing, whispered, what if they're not just talking but teaching us? Sarah looked at her daughter, then at the glowing helix on the monitor. For the first time, she wondered if Anderson's obsession wasn't madness, but clarity. The alliance, Sarah, Lee, Wang, Rivera, and even Emma, was no longer just documenting a mystery. They were part of it. The late summer sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the fields of Willow Creek Farm. Sarah stood at the edge of the property, her boots sinking slightly into the rich, loamy soil. Before her stretched a spiral of vibrant wildflowers, marigolds, cosmos, and zinnias, arranged with mathematical precision. Nearby, Emma knelt, sketching a new geometric pattern in her notebook, her pencil dancing across the page. The patterns had become their shared language, a way to communicate with the visitors who had changed their lives. It had started as an experiment. After decoding Anderson's cryptic journal entries, Sarah and Emma hypothesized that the visitors responded to intentional designs. The first spiral, etched into the barley field, had glowed faintly under the moonlight 2 nights later, its edges shimmering like a mirage. Since then, they'd created more. Concentric circles in the clover patch, a Fibonacci sequence in the vegetable garden, each one met with subtle signs. Brief pulses of light, a faint hum in the air, or a sudden burst of growth in the surrounding crops. The farm had become a canvas, a dialogue between Earth and the unknown. The garden's bounty was staggering. Rows of tomatoes, zucchini, and kale flourished beyond reason, their colors vivid, their flavors intense. Sarah explained the surplus to the local food bank as the result of experimental organic techniques, a half-truth that masked the soil's otherworldly enhancement. The community praised her ingenuity, and the food bank's shelves overflowed, feeding families across the county. Sarah felt a quiet pride, but also a weight. She was a steward of something far larger than herself. Emma, now 13, had transformed alongside the farm. Her asthma, once a constant shadow, had vanished, her inhaler forgotten in a drawer. She ran through the fields with boundless energy, her laughter echoing across the property. At school, her grades soared, particularly in math and science, where she dazzled teachers with her ability to visualize complex patterns. "It's like I see the world differently now," she told Sarah one evening, her eyes bright. Sarah wondered if the visitor's influence extended beyond the soil, touching her daughter in ways she couldn't yet understand. Sarah's own life had shifted. Her consulting work, once focused on corporate efficiency, now centered on sustainable agriculture. She pored over Anderson's journal, cross-referencing his observations with her own. The soil's microbial activity was off the charts, teeming with organisms that defied classification. She incorporated these insights into her proposals, advocating for regenerative farming practices that could feed millions. But she was careful, always careful, to omit the extraterrestrial connection. The world wasn't ready for that truth. The farm itself had come alive under their care. The weathered barn gleamed with fresh red paint, its roof patched and sturdy. The fences, once sagging, stood tall, enclosing fields that buzzed with pollinators. Wildflowers lined the driveway, a riot of color that drew compliments from neighbors. The house, too, felt like home again, its creaky floors polished, its kitchen filled with the scent of fresh bread and herbs. Sarah no longer woke at night, heart pounding at every strange sound. Her fear of the unknown had softened, replaced by a restless curiosity and a sense of purpose. Anderson's journal, now dog-eared and annotated, was her guide. His final entries were fervent, almost prophetic. "The visitors aren't invaders," he wrote. "They're gardeners, tending a planet they see as part of a larger ecosystem. The soil, the crops, the patterns, they're preparing Earth for a shift, enhancing our food supply to sustain us through change." Sarah lingered on those words, her skepticism giving way to agreement. The phenomena weren't random. They were symbiotic, a collaboration spanning stars. She shared Anderson's insights with Lee, her old friend and soil scientist, who now led a small team of researchers. Together, they drafted proposals for global agricultural advancements, new crop rotation methods, microbial inoculants, water-efficient systems, all inspired by the farm's miraculous output. They presented their work as cutting-edge science, burying the extraterrestrial link beneath layers of data and jargon. Lee, ever pragmatic, didn't press Sarah for the full truth, though his knowing glances suggested he suspected more. "Whatever you're doing out there," he said, "it's working." Each night, Sarah stepped onto the porch, a mug of chamomile tea in hand, and watched the sky. The lights no longer startled her. They appeared in patterns of their own. 3 pulses, a pause, then a slow arc across the stars. She recorded each sighting in a leather-bound notebook, searching for meaning. Were they messages? Instructions? Or simply an acknowledgement of her efforts? She didn't know, but she felt a connection, a sense that she and Emma were part of something vast and purposeful. One evening, as fireflies flickered over the spiral garden, Emma joined her on the porch. "Do you think they'll ever land?" she asked, her voice soft but unafraid. Sarah considered the question, her gaze fixed on a distant light hovering above the horizon. "Maybe they don't need to," she said. "Maybe they're already here in the soil, in the patterns, in us." Emma nodded, her expression thoughtful, and leaned against her mother's shoulder. The farm was no longer just a place. It was a bridge, a meeting point between humanity and the cosmos. Sarah felt the weight of that responsibility, but also its promise. Whatever change was coming, she and Emma were ready to meet it, one pattern at a time. In late September, a visitation brought a breakthrough that reshaped their understanding of the farm's purpose. It began just after midnight, when Sarah woke to a low hum vibrating through the farmhouse windows. Stepping outside, she saw a radiant light hovering over the garden, its beam longer and more intense than any previous sighting. Unlike the fleeting pulses of past encounters, this one lingered, bathing the rows of vegetables and fruit trees in a steady, golden glow. The air felt charged, almost alive, carrying a faint scent of ozone and blooming flowers, despite the autumn chill. By morning, the garden had transformed. Tomato vines, once modest, now sprawled like jungle creepers, heavy with fruit the size of softballs, their skins glowing with an almost unnatural vibrancy. Zucchini plants had tripled in height, their leaves broad as dinner plates, and apple trees sagged under the weight of glossy, ruby-red fruit that seemed to pulse with health. Emma, skipping through the rows, gasped in delight. "Mom, it's like a fairy tale garden," she exclaimed, plucking a strawberry that filled her small palm. Sarah, awestruck, bit into one herself. The flavor was impossibly rich, sweet, and tangy, as if distilled from 100 summers. Sarah's sensors, strategically placed around the farm, had captured detailed spectral data during the event. The readings were unlike anything she'd seen in her years as a biologist. The light's energy signature showed complex patterns, harmonics that oscillated across ultraviolet, infrared, and even uncharted wavelengths. She sent the data to Lee's team at the university, who pored over it with growing excitement. Lee called her that evening, his voice tinged with awe. "The soil's biochemistry is being enhanced deliberately," he said. "It's not just growth hormones or nutrients. The microbial activity is off the charts. Symbiotic organisms are being introduced, ones that don't match any known terrestrial profiles. This isn't random, Sarah. It's engineered." Wong, the team's ecologist, joined the call, her tone measured but urgent. "This is terraforming, slow and subtle, for our benefit. The changes are optimizing the soil for sustainability. Higher yields, better resilience to drought, pests, even climate shifts. Whoever, or whatever, is doing this understands our ecosystem better than we do." Rivera, the physicist, chimed in with a theory that sent chills down Sarah's spine. "They're teaching us," he said. "Agriculture is a universal language. Every civilization needs to eat. They're using the farm to communicate, showing us how to thrive." The revelation deepened when Sarah shared Anderson's star map device with Lee's team. She'd kept it hidden until now, unsure of its significance. The small, metallic sphere, no larger than a grapefruit, hummed faintly when activated. It projected a holographic display of constellations, but not as seen from Earth. The stars were arranged from an unfamiliar vantage point, with several systems marked by pulsing glyphs. Lee's team cross-referenced the projections with astronomical databases, identifying 3 systems within 50 light-years as potential matches. Anderson believed this farm was a focal point, Lee said, where their presence is strongest. These marked systems could be origins, destinations, or even waypoints. Sarah stood in the barn, staring at the device as it floated above her workbench, its light casting eerie shadows on the wooden walls. She felt a weight settle over her. Not just the responsibility of the farm, but the realization that she'd inherited a mission. Anderson hadn't chosen this land by chance. He'd known, or at least suspected, that it was a bridge between worlds. The thought was both exhilarating and daunting. What do they want? Why here? Why now? And why her? Emma's voice broke her reverie. The girl stood in the doorway, clutching a glowing peach from the garden. "Mom, are they our friends? Like fireflies, but bigger." Her wide eyes held no fear, only curiosity. Sarah knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Exactly," she said, laughing softly. "They're different, not scary. They're showing us how to grow things, like sharing a secret recipe." Emma grinned, satisfied, and ran back to the house, her small figure silhouetted against the twilight. That night, Sarah sat on the porch, watching the stars. The farm was quiet, save for the rustle of leaves in the breeze. She thought of Anderson's journals, filled with sketches of lights and cryptic phrases about the gardeners are patient. She thought of the soil, alive with alien life forms working in harmony with Earth's own. And she thought of Emma, who saw wonder where adults might see threat. The visitors hadn't spoken, not in words, but their message was clear: grow, learn, trust. Sarah opened her notebook and began to write, her pen moving with purpose. She detailed the garden's changes, the spectral data, the star map's projections. She sketched the glowing fruits, the towering vines, and, in the margin, a firefly with Emma's note, "Big friends." This was her reply to the visitors, a record of understanding, a step toward whatever came next. The farm wasn't just hers anymore. It was humanity's, a living testament to a new chapter not just for her, but for all who would come after. By October, Bennett Farm had transformed into a sanctuary of quiet discovery, a place where the ordinary and the extraordinary intertwined. The old farmhouse, once sagging under decades of neglect, now stood proud, its freshly painted white clapboards gleaming under the autumn sun. Sarah and Emma had worked tirelessly through the summer, restoring every creaky floorboard, every chipped window pane, and every forgotten corner of the home. The garden, too, was a marvel, a patchwork of vibrant wildflowers, herbs, and vegetables that seemed to thrive with an almost unnatural vigor, as if the land itself were whispering secrets of growth to the roots below. The farm was more than a home now. It was a beacon. Night after night, Sarah and Emma continued their observations, charting the strange lights that danced across the sky above the fields. These weren't mere stars or passing planes. They moved with purpose, sometimes forming patterns that mirrored the spirals and shapes the two women had begun creating in the garden beds, marked with stones and twine. The lights had become a dialogue, a silent conversation between Earth and something beyond. Sarah's notebooks, once filled with Anderson's cryptic equations, now overflowed with sketches of constellations, light patterns, and theories about what, or who, might be watching. The scientific team had grown cautiously. Sarah, ever protective of Anderson's legacy, vetted each new member with care, ensuring they were driven by curiosity rather than ambition. There was Dr. Lila Patel, a botanist fascinated by the garden's impossible yields. Dr. Marcus Reed, an astrophysicist who saw parallels between the lights and deep space signals. And Dr. Elena Voss, a linguist who believed the patterns might encode a language. Together, they worked in the refurbished barn, now a makeshift lab filled with telescopes, soil analyzers, and computers humming with data. Anderson's work, his journals, his formulas, his radical ideas about the symbiosis between the land and the cosmos was their foundation. Sarah had preserved it all, and now was poised to rewrite not just agriculture, but humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. One crisp October evening, as the air carried the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke, Sarah and Emma sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets. Fireflies blinked lazily across the fields, their soft glow mingling with the first stars. Above, the sky was clear, a vast canvas of indigo. As they watched, a single light appeared, not a star, but one of their lights, pulsing steadily. It traced a slow, deliberate spiral, an exact replica of the pattern Emma had etched into the garden that morning. "They see us," Emma whispered, her voice a mix of awe and certainty. Her young face, lit by the glow of the fireflies, held a wisdom far beyond her years. She clutched a small notebook of her own, filled with drawings of the lights and poems she'd written about the stars. Sarah nodded, her heart swelling with a strange mix of pride and humility. She thought of Anderson's words, scrawled in the margins of his final journal. "The land will protect the truth until someone ready comes along." She felt the weight of those words now, not as a burden, but as a calling. The farm, the lights, the patterns, they were all part of something larger, a legacy that stretched from the soil beneath her feet to the stars above. Anderson had known it, had trusted the land to hold his discoveries safe until the right moment. That moment was now. Sarah reached for Emma's hand, squeezing it gently. "We're ready," she said softly, her voice steady despite the enormity of it all. Not just to survive, but to carry this forward, to show the world what's possible. Emma smiled, her eyes reflecting the pulsing light in the sky. "We're bridging Earth and the stars," she said, echoing words Sarah had read aloud from Anderson's notes just days before. As the light above faded, blending into the constellation it had briefly outshone, Sarah felt a quiet certainty settle over her. The truth was no longer buried in the earth or hidden in the sky. It was alive, growing, in the hands of those who dared to listen. Bennett Farm was no longer just a place. It was a promise, a testament to wonder, and a bridge to whatever lay beyond.